What's up, guys? Canadian Guy here, and I am back and joined by a previous guest, a legendary guest, somebody that is a creator of some of the most high-speed action that you probably already know and love. Ladies and gentlemen, the previous director for Crash Team Racing nitro-fueled, Thomas Wilson. Thomas, it's great to have you.
Great. Thanks for having me. I think it's amazing.
It's been a long time since we talked, all the way back in Quebec at the go-kart area in the little back room. Yeah. Right away, I reached out to you because we saw that CTR had passed 10 million units. I gotta ask, what are your thoughts on that?
Honestly, it's pretty amazing. Looking back at when we were working on the game, kind of the expectations were to reach a few millions, but to reach 10 millions, that's pretty amazing. I have a few friends at Beenox, of course, because I'm not working at Beenox anymore, but I mean, they told me a little bit ahead of time that they were informed that we'd reached that milestone. I think it's pretty amazing. When you think about it, there's Mario Kart, of course, out there. The amazing game, and there's not a lot of games that come close to the quality of the experience of Mario Kart. So knowing that we reached 10 millions with CTR nitro-fueled, for me, was amazing. So it means that even though the game released in 2019, it's still running. People are still buying the game and still enjoying playing it. So that's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. So let's go back a little bit. Let's go in the time machine and go all the way back to about 2019. You start seeing the reviews pouring in, the Metacritic scores. The game is getting accolades and awards. As you're sitting through this, what are your feelings and what is happening behind the scenes? Like, what is going on? What is the reaction behind the scenes as well?
Well, I mean, to talk about my reaction, I think we need to go back to when we were initially asked if we could work on Crash Team Racing. Crash Team Racing was, for me, one of the games that I was playing the most when I started in the game industry. So we're going all the way back to just before the turn of the century. You know, I started in 1999, so that was about 2000, I think. And with my wife at the time, we were playing the hell out of CTR. So it was one of our favorite games at the time. So you can imagine, we'd worked on a few remastered editions of Call of Duty, and then Activision asked the question, and I still remember because we were on the phone. They're like, would you guys be interested in remastering Crash Team Racing? I looked at my co-director at the time, and I was like, we have to say yes. And so eventually, a few conversations later, we ended up having the responsibility of remastering Crash Team Racing. For me, I wanted to create more than just a remastered edition of CTR. Of course, we needed to nail what the original experience had been, but it had to be so much more. So we started making suggestions, finding ways of potentially incorporating things from Crash Nitro Kart, additional characters in, basically, and even throwing new content. When the game came out, we knew we had something on our hands that would please the fan of the original, but we knew we had so much more that was eventually announced progressively. When the reviews came in, I was really happy. I was really proud of what the team had put together. And of course, the culmination point of that was when we won the Game Award, for Best Sports and Racing Game of 2019. I mean, that was sort of like the pinnacle, right? Basically, we were so proud of bringing the trophy back home with the team because it's been such a fun project to be working on, and I wanted it to give it justice. So having those awards, having the fans really enjoying the game, I mean, for me, it was a confirmation that we had done something right. And so I guess in a nutshell, for me, it was just pride. People were super proud of what they put together. We could celebrate what we had created. It was just amazing.
CTR winning a Game Award is genuinely like a huge historical moment for not just yourself, Beenox, but the franchise as well. So I do want to go a little bit behind the scenes on that just a little bit. What happens after you head back to Quebec, you head back to Beenox? What happens afterwards? I'm always curious, what happens after you win the Game Award, whether it be from Activision, whether it be from co-workers or the Game Awards themselves? Is there anything particular that happens, or?
If you watch the Game Awards, some of the awards, you go on stage and you pick the trophy. Mm-hmm. But there were some awards that are just awarded by Jeff Keighley, sort of like announcing the winner. So we were 4 from Beenox in the theater, and Jeff Keighley was right next to us on a stage announcing what was coming up. The Best Sports Racing Game of the Year was not an award that was handed out on stage. stage. It's kind of an awkward moment because you're celebrating, but you're the only one kind of cheering in the room because, well, I mean, so first Keely makes the announcement of the contenders, and just by hearing people clap in the room, I could feel that we were probably going to win.
The best traditional and non-traditional sports and racing game, and those nominees are Crash Team Racing Nitro-fueled, announced last year at the Game Awards.
So when he said that Crash Team Racing had won, I just jumped literally out of my screaming. But we're just like, people are clapping, but, we're just celebrating. And then you sit back in your seat and you just have to wait to get the award later. Then we didn't have the trophy in our hand. We had to wait for the trophy to be shipped to our studio. And that year, turns out that we had a team, so that all the producers and the marketing team from Activision, there was also Sekiro, who was nominated. And so it ended up winning Best Game of the Year at the same time. So the celebrations were split. Part of our team had to go with folks from that won the game for Sekiro. And then we were also with this half of the other team. We went out to eat at a restaurant, and then we just cheered and talked about, like, we told stories, war stories of, developing the game. So we went back home, and then we took a big picture with the trophy. And we ended up making sure that we placed it somewhere so that when people were coming inside the office, they could see that we won the award.
As time went on from like when the game initially launched and even beyond the initial Grand Prix, the game was adjusted and changed as support continued. On the back end of things, from what you were seeing, what were you learning as players were learning more and more? What were you tweaking and adding and adjusting, and why?
Well, there were plenty of things, but we're not, at the time I remember that the speed at which we could make changes was not as fast as I wished we could. So we had to sort of almost plan 1 month ahead of time based on the feedback we were getting, because the updates required a lot of planning and submitting. When we were submitting a change, we had to have it ready even before we were reading the feedback from the community. So what would happen sometimes is if people were, making a suggestion or wanted something to be tweaked, sometimes it could only be done like the month later or even 2 months later, because by the time we get the feedback, by the time we were addressing it and the time we submitted, there was a period of time where the change would not happen. So we tried to be as fast as possible based on the feedback we were getting and the things we could potentially address. And so we planned ahead of time what we thought were going to be cool Grand Prix, or like things that would be cool when they were themed together. And in terms of like the feedback we were getting from the community, sometimes if a comment was made and we were like, oh, that's kind of an interesting idea, we would plan for it at a later stage. A lot on our team were reading the comments, then we would address them if it was possible.
Now, there was a specific question and or suggestion that the community had at the time that I really wanted to ask Thomas about. And it was in regards to a specific game mechanic that came from Crash Nitro Kart, and that was the anti-gravity. Because of Crash Nitro Kart's content inclusion, whether it be the retrofitted tracks or even characters, the anti-gravity was a mechanic that was left out. So I asked Thomas, was the anti-gravity mechanic ever experimented with for nitro-fueled, or was it something that they knew from the get-go that wasn't going to be included in the game?
It's kind of interesting because I had played Nitro Kart, and of course I still preferred Crash Team Racing, but
sure,
I totally forgot that there was anti-grav segments. And when I started playing it, I was like, holy cow, the Crash Bandicoot franchise had done it before Mario Kart.
That's right, yes.
Because it became this big thing when you're playing Mario Kart, there's these cool anti-grav sections. And then I was like, oh my God, it was already in there. The question was early on from a design standpoint is this something that we want to support? To be honest, it was a very interesting creative decision to be made, because let's say we would have supported these segments. I felt like people would say, so Crash Team Racing has copied Mario Kart. Even if we were coming out and it existed before, there would still be a comparison made with Mario Kart, and then people would say, you know what? It just feels like they copied Mario Kart. And but also deciding to support anti-grav segments meant that we needed to support things like, the camera flipping around. I mean, it was not you don't just simply decide to make that happen, because from an engineering standpoint, the fact that it needed to be supported would require features that would have to be developed. Now, because the concept or the original mandate was to remaster Crash Team Racing, we believe that supporting the anti-grav segments was not necessary. I must say also, it was not kind of the best aspect of the racing of Crash Team Nitro Kart. So what we early on, as soon as we made the decision that what we needed to do was to adapt the track design to the Crash Team Racing mechanic, we felt that people would still be happy to be jumping back into some of the track design from Crash Nitro Kart, but adapted to the original experience that people love. The decision was made quite early that we would incorporate most of the track elements, but then we would adapt it so that it would feel like a Crash Team Racing experience.
Speaking of a Crash Team Racing experience, nearly everybody at the time could experience nitro-fueled, whether you had a PlayStation, an Xbox, or even a Nintendo Switch. However, there was one platform that was missing, and that was the PC crowd. Crash Team Racing on PC has probably been the number one thing that's been asked since the game was even announced. There has been rumors of its development, from it being canceled, put on ice, delayed, you name it, we've heard it. Even now, 6 years later, people are still asking and hoping that there is some chance of a PC port coming for CTR nitro-fueled. Now, of course, Thomas couldn't comment on whether something is currently in the works, but during our interview, he finally revealed the truth behind whether or not Crash Team Racing nitro-fueled ever had a PC port in development.
So a lot of people on our team were reading the comments and we were extracting what we could address. Some things sometimes we wouldn't. It's got to be probably one of your questions, like when is a PC port coming in? And there was never a plan to work on a PC version for Crash Team Racing.
Oh, okay.
That's an example of, I still see it cut through the comments. It's like, when are we going to get a PC version? And there was never time to work on a PC version, honestly.
I'll be honest. Hearing that there was no plans to make a PC version for Crash Team Racing nitro-fueled was a little bit of a shock to me. So I followed up and asked very bluntly, why not?
If you're making a PC version, you need to have a dedicated team working on a PC version. So a good example is at Beenox, where, Beenox was and is still responsible for the PC version of Call of Duty. So there was a dedicated team working on that. So if you're looking at the original plan, the budget that we have for the project, there was no envelope available to actually have a separate dedicated team working on a PC version. There was a lot of security challenges around making sure that the game was secure, that no one could cheat, because when you're making a PC game, it's much easier for people to cheat. Also, I would probably argue that I'm not sure how many people would be playing a PC version. Of course, when you're thinking about like the games that you're making, you're thinking about reaching out to the audience. And so there's a cost related to developing a PC version. So you want to make sure that there's enough people who would want to play the game. And our community was less on on PC than on console.
Right. So you're basically kind of suggesting about the loud minority. They might be loud, but the payoff isn't going to be as big as one might think.
Yes. Exactly.
Okay. And one of the things I really like too is during the Grand Prix, you guys were able to kind of flex your own creative muscles to be able to create something on your own. Now, were there any Grand Prix tracks that were either cut or overhauled completely, or any track ideas that you loved but it just didn't pan out?
Before we jump into the Grand Prix, one thing that people might have noticed, one of the important elements to me when we started remastering the original tracks was to always try to give it a stronger theme than what the original technology could offer. When you're thinking about the original track, you're talking PS1 games, so what you could model, what you could texture in the environment to be running smoothly. You didn't have the same level of power that we would have when we started remastering the tracks. One thing we did really early on is we started looking at every track that existed, and we were like, what can we do to reinforce, I'm thinking one track as a good example is Hot Air Skyway. What we decided to do was to make it like a floating casino. There was nothing in the original track that said it was a floating casino, but for the villain to be there, it felt totally right to actually have the theme, a stronger theme there. There was a snow track. We decided it was going to be like a ski resort for penguins. Oh, and I'm thinking about like the track for Tiny Tiger, putting graffitis on and metal statues, and then it was a kind of a big light show. So there are things that we started doing to just make the track more memorable in terms of the theme. And so then once we'd done that and we were happy with reinforcing some of the themes for each of the track, we applied the same formula to the tracks we were designing for the Grand Prix. I like when we're starting thinking about ideas that could fit together. So you think about the track theme without thinking about the layout itself, just what would be a cool theme. And then from there, we started thinking about, so what are going to be the additional outfits that the characters could wear? What are going to be the new carts that are going to be coming in that will match that theme? And then we start bundling, we start getting a big picture of, this is a cool theme, so let's go with that. And then what would happen at the time is that the design team, because we had a few designers on the team, would pitch one-pager ideas to me about what the layout would be based on the theme we had suggested. The designers would pitch their ideas, and then we would figure out which one we thought was more interesting. Once we start working on the layout of a track, look, I'm a good racer at CTR, but I'm not the best racer. So what we would do is we would use our QA testers' skills to determine if the track was interesting enough. For those who could master Blue Flame and could just stay on the track forever, or if we wanted to put shortcuts and everything, we would put the layout, the 3D layout, in their hands so they could try it out, make suggestions, make recommendations before we would start dressing up the entire track. From a grayscale point of view, we would know if the track was interesting enough, and if we could say, you know what, that's the layout, and then we can start like dressing up the environment. We had a calendar. I know the community sort of complained about the speed at which things were coming out. Because it was a racing game, I still believe it was the right pace, the right time frame to be releasing content. If you wait for too long and you release a track 3 months after the first one, for me, it was not the rhythm at which we could sustain the engagement with the community. We're talking about some of the tracks that were not used. Essentially, we used everything that we pretty much created. The only thing is we add some Grand Prix that were potentially planned if we were continuing down this road, but we already knew ahead of time, talking to Activision, that, I think we did 8. Is it 8? 8 Grand Prix, I think. We were informed that there was a point where it was probably going to be the last Grand Prix we were creating. And so there wasn't much work thrown in the garbage in terms of like track layout. What we tried to do is figure it out before, on paper at least, or maybe if there were 2 ideas we weren't sure about, you start working on it in a gray block stage, and then you can quickly figure out which one was the strongest, and then we would just pick it and start working with it.
So I have to ask, can you share a few of the Grand Prix that you had set aside just in case if they were going to continue, or is that something?
No, I don't mind sharing. Actually, it's funny because I was asking myself, what were the Grand Prix that we didn't do or we dropped? I remember, I think the one that we knew we were probably going to be playing with was what the theme I called Heroes versus Villains. And the idea for me was to sort of like make a tongue-in-cheek approach to superheroes. Imagine if you're thinking about like Mega Mind, the idea of having a city. So the track would probably been through kind of a retro futuristic city. Some of the main characters having superhero outfits, and then the villains having like super villain outfits. So it would have been something like that. So that was a theme that I thought was interesting. And for when I was thinking about the others, I was like, can't remember. Honestly, I can't remember. I think that was one of them. The reason why I can't think of any other themes, it's probably because we knew ahead of time that there was only, so much Grand Prix we could make. So I had this one in store, but, I can't think about the others that we had in mind, honestly. That was one that I remember I wanted to create if we had the time.
There was a set amount of time and Activision just came to you and said, hey, this is the end date. Did you want to continue to do Grand Prix? Did you feel it was the right call to end the support when it did, or did you want to keep going?
Yeah, I would have wanted to keep going because we were having such a blast working on a game like this one. As long as there were people playing the game, I would have been, I would have tried to come up with themes as long as it was necessary. So yes, of course, I wish we could have continued. But at the same time, I felt like we had covered a lot of ground based on what existed in the franchise, because even sometimes we were even bringing back obscure characters because we were diving into everything that had been created in the Crash Team Racing universe. I think there's been good Crash Bandicoot games and some less good. And so the thing is, it's like, what do we extract from each of them that could be kind of interesting or useful? Because there was, from Crash Nitro Kart, there are things that we would pick, and then there'd been another racing game. What was the other racing game?
Crash Tag Team?
Yeah, Crash Tag Team. So even from there, we picked some of the themes. Actually, from what I remember, the first theme that we picked, the Egyptian theme, was inspired by a track from that game. But then what we would do is we would try to extract like as many characters as we could, because to be honest, I think we're probably still holding the record. If we had tried for a Guinness World Record, I think we were holding the most playable character for a kart racing game ever. Once we were finished with the stuff we integrated, I think we had 55 playable characters.
It's quite a bit,
including a crate. So we were like, so what could be interesting that people would like to have in the game? So as long as we could bundle themes, we would have tried to incorporate and add additional characters into the mix. But we were sort of like running a little short of things we could pick from.
With the Grand Prix and stuff, you would introduce typically new characters. Were there any characters that you wanted to bring to CTR but you couldn't, or were there just certain characters that, because there's a few people, I know the one character a lot of people talk about is like Willy Wumpa Cheeks. Were there these other characters that were originally planned, and were there any characters that were cut?
No characters were cut. It was just a matter of planning which ones we were introducing with each Grand Prix. And Willy Wumpa Cheeks would have been one of the characters, I think, that would have appeared at a later stage. I think also because in our Halloween Grand Prix, there's a kind of a fat lady. We had
Madame Amberly.
Madame Amberly, there you go. That was another character that we discussed bringing as well. So the idea was like, let's figure out which would be the most meaningful, or which would be better tied to the Grand Prix experience that we had created. So there weren't many characters left. I think we could have probably, I don't know, maybe there was like 5 or 10-ish characters left, but not that much.
You got to create an iconic Grand Prix, which was the Spyro Grand Prix, which was, of course, very different from all the other Grand Prix because, of course, it featured Spyro. I wanted to pick your brain a little bit. Was it a partnership, or did you do it on your own? What was that like?
So it was a partnership. There's nothing I like more than to be working with other teams and making sure that we bring the absolute best that we could bring. Of course, we were hearing the community asking about Spyro, and we knew that we were going to be releasing Spyro at some point in time in the Grand Prix. We wanted to make a Grand Prix with Spyro. I was really excited about like bringing this to life. Maybe you didn't know this, but although we were the lead developer, Vicarious Vision and Toys for Bob helped us deliver that experience. They would be working on some track, they would be dressing up some of the tracks based on the directions we were giving, and then we were the ones approving the material. So we got help. And when we're thinking about Spyro, I mean, it's a track that we created, but for me, we started thinking about what would be a cool concept for Spyro, and considering that there are so many cool environments in the original the remastered version of Spyro, we just asked Toys for Bob what were the cool environments from the original remastered game that we could bring into a track. And this is where the idea of having portals that would actually take you through multiple environments from the remastered game was something that I thought was exciting. This is why, for instance, at the beginning, the first segment of the track, I thought, having statues from the frozen dragons was something that was kind of cool because then we can make a garden out of it. And then we're like, okay, then we're going to go through our library theme and then we're going to jump into a snowy environment taken from this level. The idea was established quite early, and then we figured out technically how we were going to do it and how we would teleport the players while still having the track that would still work, making sure that there were no exploits from the fact that, we were teleporting players. And then, so this is how the idea was built. From when you're designing that, this is where we can ask the other studio, could you send assets over that we could use? Although we're not using the same technology, the idea was that, because it's a stylized environment, it was kind of a natural fit to have like Spyro themed environments within the Crash Team Racing universe. So it was a matter of adapting what had been created from the Spyro remastered game.
It's no secret people started to data mine the game. And as people were data mining the game, they were learning secrets and learning characters that were coming. And you guys actually caught on to this and started to actually use it to your advantage. Can you talk to me about your thoughts about the data mining, and then whose idea was this and where did this lead?
It's actually the team who informed me that they were watching what was going on. And they were the ones suggested that we should actually have a little bit of fun with that. I remember that it's actually through the testers, because the testers were the best players. They were interested in figuring out what people were saying. And so at one point when they realized that people were doing this, they said, we should mess around with the community. And I was like, you know what? That's kind of interesting. From a creative standpoint, I'm more of a kind of a traditional creative director. You want something cool, you want something badass. But then when they said, you know what, we should make a crate, a playable character, my initial reaction was like, you're joking, right? What is this about? And then they started telling me about what they would find out about data mining. And then I was like, oh, now I get it. Now I think that's going to be super hilarious. This is because when you're thinking about like some of the stuff that you want to put in the game, sometimes you have to go with, well, that's an obvious choice. You have to have Spyro and the Spyro Grand Prix. But then sometimes you can think about like outside the box, weird characters like a chicken that could be racing the car. This is when we're starting having like creative ideas. And when they made the suggestion of putting some hints in the stuff that would sort of like get to a point where people would sort of like analyze what was in the data and they started spitballing ideas and crazy stuff. This is where this is one of the ideas that was actually planned ahead. Remember when I was telling you the time it would take to get an update, it could only happen sometimes 2 months later. But still, I mean, it was in the pipeline. We would put it in there, and then we're like, let's do this. So, and I think the crate came out in the last update we made. And I thought it was going to be like, if you're racing online, I think it's kind of like the ultimate insult. Like you win races by racing as a crate. One thing I can say though, because talking about testers, that's one thing I can mention. So of course, sometimes we're thinking about adding some additional mode. One of my favorite was the ring race. The inspiration, because my favorite racing game of all time is Wipeout. I've been a fan from the beginning. One thing I liked was the zone mode, because when you were playing Wipeout, the zone mode was something where every lap you do faster and faster and faster. And so it became insanely crazy as you're trying to not hit the walls and explode. I was like, how can we try to teach players to be better Crash Team Racing racers by putting the rings in places where you can start now getting into the blue fire mode and then start to keep it up and master it as you're actually racing. So for me, it was a way of creating this crazy mode where you go faster and faster, but at the same time teaching as players are trying it. That was one thing that was introduced when we were talking to the testers. But one thing you need to know is when we introduced the time trials from the Beenox testers, I had to tell them, be good, but not be at your best. So you can imagine that even if the community thought it was crazy hard, our testers could actually be better than the time trial, numbers we put out, because I was like, they got to be able to beat you guys. Yeah, you have to figure out a way of just sometimes making a little mistake so that if somebody beats you, they get super excited. So that was so I had to tell them, be good, but be not at your best.
William P. was a nemesis.
Well, but that's actually one of the testers who were really involved in the great idea. So, yeah.
card. That makes sense. I wanted to ask, was there ever a conversation about there being a potential CTR 2?
To be honest, there's never been, well, not while I was there.
Okay.
There's never been talks about making Crash Team Racing 2. And this is why we injected so much content in Crash Team Racing nitro-fueled, because it was the opportunity to add more tracks, more characters, more card customization, to a point where, you know, we had been around pretty much the entire content of the franchise. And, you know, you had kind of the ultimate racing game in the Crash Bandicoot universe. So I don't recall having a conversation about having another racing game. I don't know. Maybe now they're having conversations about it. I mean, I don't know. I love racing games. I love kart racing games. I wish there could be a second Crash Team Racing, as much as I would like also when we were working on Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, how much I wish there could have been a second one as well. But, you know, sometimes it's decisions that are made at a higher level. But no, there hadn't been conversations about a Crash Team Racing 2. I mean, let's face it. The reason why I left Beenox, and some of the folks that are with me now left Beenox, is because there was only Call of Duty left. As much as Call of Duty is an incredible franchise, I mean, for me, my heart is much closer to stylized worlds like Crash Team Racing or the Crash Bandicoot universe. I like colors. I like worlds that feel like they're coming out of an animated film. And so the idea was, when I left, is because I felt that I was no longer having fun making games at Activision. On the side, while I was at Beenox, I was designing board games with a company, a local company here in Quebec called Gladius. I started working on a game that was called Dragons and Ladders, a blend of Dungeons and Dragons with snakes and ladders. So we had created characters like a barbarian, a mage, an archer, that sort of thing. I ended up creating a world that's called Heroes of Mount Dragon. Because I'm a dragon fan, I always tell people that the coolest thing on earth are dragons. I created a universe in which we have heroes that can transform into dragons. It's sort of a nostalgia almost to Saturday morning cartoons. It has a Power Rangers vibe where you have the red barbarian, the blue assassin, the yellow brawler. It's essentially a fantasy beat 'em up. And essentially, it's 8 characters that fight evil, and they can transform into dragons to do so. You can play up to 4 players together, and then you fight orcs, goblins, dark elves, trolls, and that sort of stuff. And we introduced a little bit of what you find in Crash Team Racing with the power-ups. When you're playing competitive mode, you smash crates that give you power-ups or curses. If I smash a crate and I get the frog curse, then I can transform all the other players into frogs while I'm hitting monsters and then making more points. And so this is a thing that we're putting together. It's a colorful world. So the game's coming out on Steam tomorrow. So people can go up there and, you know, wishlist us if they want. The game's going to be sold at the original price point is $24.99, but it's going to be sold with a 20% discount, so $19.99. So it's not very expensive. Eventually, the game will come out on Switch in September, and then PlayStation and Xbox at a later stage during fall, because we're a very small team. We're 9. You know, when I left Beenox, we were 450. Which was a much bigger number. So now we're a very small studio working on this game. What I created is a transmedia initiative. So there's a board game. We have books that you can read about each of these characters. Now we have the 2 first books being translated in English that will become available. There's puzzles you can make. Anyway, if people go and type Heroes of Mount Dragon, that will end up on the website that sort of presents all the products that are available. We're even right now starting to work on an animated series. There's a lot of things happening right now. What you need to know, though, and it's kind of sorry to say that as a way of ending the interview, but in between that period, I learned that I had stage 4 prostate cancer.
Oh, no.
Yes, which sucks big time. So I've been undergoing chemotherapy for a while, but at the same time, since I don't know how long I have left, the idea for me is to try to figure out how I can work and have fun working, creating things that I'm interested in. So this is why the Heroes of Mount Dragon universe is so important to me, because, you know, that's the stuff I'm going to be leaving behind me. And so the idea is that we're working together to create this cool universe. I really hope that after we created the beat 'em up version, because we had a limited budget, we can eventually figure out a way of creating something that would be more exploratory, you know, like something along the lines of the Zeldas of this world, where you can explore and transform into a dragon and fly over the land, that sort of thing. So hopefully this can happen. But, right now, what matters to me is that it's shipping Heroes of Mount Dragon as a beat 'em up game. That's really, kind of what we're leaving behind as a studio.
I think that leaving behind a legacy like that is important. I think leaving behind a mark that people can turn and point and say, hey, who did that? And it's your name's on that, right? So we'll definitely be checking out the whole project, whether it just be the game or any of the future products. We're definitely going to be looking out for that as well. Thank you so much for joining us today, Thomas. It was this was a fantastic interview, enlightening in all different ways. And I'm sure the community is going to be thrilled to hear all of your answers.
And by the way, when you reached out to me, I still remember, and I had seriously, my heart was broken when you did that. You had an episode where you started talking about the fact that you knew there was no longer going to be support on Prixs Racing. And I think it was kind of like the saddest 10 minutes of my life watching you, and you looked depressed. And I was like, no, please. I remember I was like, please don't be sad. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we made. But it's funny because you look really sad.
Oh yeah.
It's almost like you didn't edit the video. We were just like looking at your mic in the screen and going, man.
Yeah, because that's how I felt, right? I love CTR, right? For me, I enjoyed Mario Kart, but CTR captured my heart. And to see, Mario Kart, have all this support, and I'm like, but this is the game for me. Like, it's so good. So yeah, that was basically an unedited video of just being like,
yep,
there you go. So